Hello class, this will be going over the evaluating basic trigonometric functions, but I am also only going to go over just a little bit just to help you guys get set up for this. Let's start with, I'm only going to go over 3 questions here, number 2, number 7, and number 9. For number 2, we have a cosine of negative 150. For questions like these, you always have to understand that a negative angle goes clockwise in this direction, because usually for all of these positive angles that you see, you should all go in the counterclockwise direction from the 3 o'clock position. So if I were to plot this in a xy coordinate plane, my terminal side would end up being here because this is your negative 90 degrees, and I need to go clockwise all the way like this. This is negative 150 in total. So how much more do I need to go from negative 90? Turns out that I need to go 60 degrees more that way. So then what is this triangle? Remember, the triangle's base always has to abide by the x-axis here. So that is the triangle that I'm going to draw. What is this angle in blue that I'm going to be marking as theta? Well, if this thing is 60 and this whole thing has to be 90 degrees, the rest of the part in blue has to be 30 degrees, correct? So if I draw this triangle again, that's 30 degrees. And if you go back to the reference angle chart, it should turn out that x value and y value will always be your sine, cosine, and then sine. So cosine of theta this way, sine of theta that way. Okay? And what we're supposed to solve for is the cosine value, so we're asked to solve for the x value here. Well, cosine of theta, in other words, what's cosine of this 30 degrees? You should be able to find out that that's square root of 3 over 2. Okay? So the value for the cosine of theta will be square root of 3 over 2, but the very final step that you guys have to take into account for is what is going to be my sine. We're talking about the third quadrant in which only tangent is going to be positive. So then my final answer here would be, oh, the value would be square root of 3 over 2 no matter what. But since I'm ending in the third quadrant, I'm always going to have a negative sign, so it's going to be negative square root of 3 over 2. So my final answer would be negative square root of 3 over 2. Okay. Now, number 7. This is going to be a positive angle, so I don't have to worry about it being going in the clockwise. It's going to be the usual counterclockwise. But the problem here, it's actually, number 1, first of all, it's in radians, and nobody really likes radians as more compared to the degrees because we're more comfortable with doing degrees, and we all get that. But the other thing is that this also needs to be determined by the coterminal angles. Because 29 pi over 6 is actually going to be way more than the actual 360 degrees. If we have the common denominator as 6, 360 degrees in radians was always 2 pi. With the common denominator of 6, that should make it 12 over 6 pi. But notice how 29 pi over 6 is just way more than that. So how do we find the coterminal angle? Well, we have to keep on subtracting by 2 pi's every time. So 29 pi over 6 minus 12 pi over 6 turns out to be 17 pi over 6. I still have something more than 12 pi over 6. So I have to subtract 12 pi over 6 one more time, and I end up getting 5 pi over 6. So what does that mean? It makes 2 complete circles like this, and then goes additional 5 pi over 6 more. But we don't really have to draw all these swirls. The only thing I really have to worry about is this 5 pi over 6 that stretches from 3 o'clock to somewhere in the second quadrant. Well, how do I know it's in the second quadrant? Well, it's because it's less than 6 pi over 6. That's pi. How short is it? Well, if this entire thing is 5 pi over 6, 5/6 of something, this is 1/6 left, 1/6 pi. So what we're asked to literally do is find out the cosine value of pi over 6, because eventually the value for these two will be the same. The only thing that's different is that this value, which turns out to be positive, this value ends up being in the second quadrant. I need to make sure I account the sign. The number will be the same, but the sign will be different. I don't want you to be confused that, oh, the video taught me that this and, oh, the video taught me that this value here and this value here will be exactly the same. No, the numbers will be the same. For example, if this turns out to be square root of 3 over 2, this will also be square root of 3 over 2, but this will turn out to be a negative sign. The only thing that's different is a sign. Okay? Now, let's take a look at how do we solve this. So if we're talking about pi over 6, that's 30 degrees, if we're more comfortable using the degrees versus radians. Or if you guys take a look at the chart, cosine of 30 degrees, oh, look at that. It's actually square root of 3 over 2. So I know the value, the answer, should be square root of 3 over 2. But like I said, what's the sign? You can write this on the quadrants too, A, S, T, C. What do these letters represent? All, sine, tangent, cosine. If we are landing in the second quadrant, like number 7, I know for a fact only sine is positive. All is positive. Everything's positive in the first quadrant. Tangent's only positive in the third. Cosine is positive only in the fourth. Since we're not in the fourth quadrant, the second quadrant means only sine is positive. So therefore, cosine of 29 pi over 6, even though the value is square root of 3 over 2, the value would be negative because we're in the second quadrant. That should be the answer for number 7. Last question, number 9. Please try this on your own. Pause the video now and draw the picture, draw the terminal side, and once you have it done and get it ready, check the answers for me by playing the video once again. For sine of 150, 150 degrees should start from the 3 o'clock position and ending up at the second quadrant position. What's going to be my angle, the triangle that I'm going to draw? This one, it will be 30 degrees. Or you can take a look at the table and go, okay, sine of 150 is the same value as sine of 30, which is 1/2. What's the other thing that we have to worry about? The last thing we always have to worry about is what is going to be my sign. Is it positive or negative? That's basically what it comes down to. A, S, T, C once again. I'm in the second quadrant, so only sine is positive. So therefore, this value, which is the trig function is sine, it's ending up being a positive. So my final answer, sine of 150 degrees, is 1/2, and it's also going to be positive value. Hope this video helped, and good luck with the rest of the questions, and I'll see you later.